Good morning, everybody. Well, I should say good afternoon for most of you. So I'm Elizabeth Van Beek, and we're going to talk about reflexology and anxiety today. So before we do so, we're just going to go through a few things here for those that are new to Zoom. And what we do is, if you've got a question that you'd like, you can either put that into the Q&A at the bottom or the chat box. So if you take your cursor right down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see there's a couple of different icons. There's one that says Q&A and another one there that says chat. So feel free to pop questions down into there or any comments. And we will, at the end of the session, we'll do a question and answer little tutorial there for anybody that's got any burning questions. Okay, so we will get started with this one. So as I said, I'm Liz Van Beek, and I am a Kiwi, so I live in New Zealand, and I was living in Berkeley, California for about 6 years, and upskilled with the holistic health out there, and also learned some more reflexology when I was over there as well. I had my own business and returned home to New Zealand about 3 years ago, and I have my own business running out here with a few different modalities, and primarily reflexology, which I absolutely love. I was really lucky to work with the likes of Bill Flocko and Christine Izzle when I was out in the States. I was a member of the board for the Reflexology Association of California, and also trained with the World Reflexology Foundation, which is based right there in California in LA. So if you would like a tutorial or a workshop for any group at all, it might be a religious group, a sports group, a support group for perhaps diabetes, anxiety, anything like that, then get in touch with those guys. There'll be a link to that later on. Okay, so we'll get on and we'll learn some about reflexology here. Basically, reflexology is a hands-on modality that we do believe goes back as far as 23,000 BC. And the reason that we think this is because if I put a little link here in the chat box for you, if you read our little blurb right at the start, there was a mention of do not harm me, do not hurt me, and I will act so you praise me. And if you look in your chat there, I've just sent you a little depiction of the frieze that was found in the tomb of the physician to the pharaoh of Ankh-Mahor, which is why we believe that reflexology first came through from the Egyptians. And with the Egyptians, okay, there was the invasion of Rome, okay, or the Romans went through, and when they pulled back and they did all of their excursions around the world with their trade routes and everything, they not only took the riches from Egypt with them, but they also took other things like the modalities, and reflexology, as it was known then, was one of those things. So they would trade that information around the world as well. So continuing with the history, we do believe that Asia, as well as like China, India, all of those beautiful countries out there, they had another parallel to what we believe as reflexology is today. And so as that was going on as well, and then with all of that trade route going and happening, it all got filtered down and slightly changed in different ways. Things were added, things were taken out, the meridians were utilized a lot more with the Asian reflexology. And then come through to the 19th century, and we have a gentleman called William Fitzgerald. And William Fitzgerald was a ear, nose and throat surgeon, and a very curious fellow he was. And so what he would do is he would put clips, clasps, on the end of his patient's fingers. And he found out that by putting pressure onto those areas, he could carry out his minor surgeries for the ear, nose, and throat, like tooth extraction, for example, and putting those clasps on the corresponding area, it would act very similar to a anesthetizing effect. And so he studied more and more on that and developed his own symptoms, or not symptoms, sorry, developed his own reasonings around that, wrote a book. And then we come down to a lady called Eunice Ingham. And if you've ever heard of Eunice Ingham, it's an American lady. She was a physiotherapist and a nurse, and she basically devoted her whole entire adult life through to getting reflexology up and out into the world, and especially in the Americas. So this is her book. If you ever come across this book, it's written by Christine Izzle. It is well worth a read if you're interested in history and specifically interested in the history of holistic health reflexology. So in that, it has letters between her and Shelby Riley, who had done some studies with William Fitzgerald. And also it goes on to say about her imprisonment multiple times, unfortunately, because it was very, very political at the time when she was trying to get the holistic modalities out there. So it was like the 40s, 50s, 60s. Changed the name of reflexology multiple times in order to be able to keep on doing her workshops and teaching people this amazing modality. So anyway, that's her book there, the biography of Eunice Ingham. So from Eunice Ingham, she, as I was saying earlier, she had put through a lot of workshops and teaching around America and filtered that down. And now it is all around America and Canada, New Zealand here, Australia, hugely big in South America, South Africa, as well as in the United Kingdom and all through Europe as well. So it's all catching on around the globe, and holistic health is once again getting out into the forefront of people's minds, which is amazing. So that's a little bit about the history of reflexology. And what we will do is we'll go through a few contraindications and benefits of reflexology. And I'll just have something to say. If I space out a little bit every now and then, I'm searching for a word. I got concussion at the end of last year. It's still a little bit niggly in the old grey matter there to find words now and then. So that's all that is. Just bear with me. So contraindications of reflexology. There are a few. The beautiful thing is that there is a vast array of benefits with reflexology. So it can be anything from skeletal imbalances to GI imbalances. So your whole digestive tract is amazing. I do a lot of work with people around that. Sleep, great benefits for sleep. 9 times out of 10 when I work on somebody that night, they are lights out, completely relaxed, deeper sleep they've had in a long time. Lymphatic system, so it works really great with our waste elimination in our systems, and mental clarity as well. So obviously I've been working a lot on that with myself to get the concussion brain back up and going again. So with the contraindications, there's a couple of things to mention. And the first one is working with somebody that is in the first trimester of pregnancy. You can still do reflexology with people, okay? There's certain areas for the reproductive system that we will not use. We will not stimulate those areas there within that first trimester. If somebody has got a fungal infection at all, like on their feet or their hands, we can actually use our ears as well for reflexology. What we do is we can wear gloves and obviously not utilize that particular area. So if it's between the toes, then you can use other areas on the feet and not the toes. If the whole foot is implicated, you can therefore use the other foot, or you can use the corresponding hand. So for instance, if somebody has got a fungal infection on the left foot, then you can use the left hand instead. And it's very similar as well. If somebody is missing a limb or has a prosthetic, then you can use the other limb or the corresponding one. Okay, and again, you can use the ears. Chemotherapy. I have worked with a friend of mine a few years ago now while she was going through chemotherapy, and I was wearing gloves, obviously, but we very quickly discovered, like within 10 minutes of doing it while she was receiving her infusion, that it wasn't a great idea to be doing it at that time. She just felt really, really woozy, even more than normal with her infusions. So we just did really nice light effleurage and then let her be, and came back to her a couple of days later when her body was ready to be doing the detoxing. Because that's the main thing with reflexology, is that it's rebalancing things as well as detoxing. So that's where it works really beautifully with our lymphatic system. Recent surgery, so as I alluded to with the chemotherapy, really good to let the body relax and to do its thing, do its repairing before you go in and work with detoxing or bringing in some more white blood cells for our immune system. And the main thing that you will see with somebody's system is saying, oh, I've had enough, okay, let's just back off the reflexology right now and let my system take over in its natural way, is sweating. So as I was saying with the detoxing, the body's pouring out all of those waste cells that it no longer needs. And so basically it does that by the quickest means possible, and 9 times out of 10 that's by sweating. So if you're reflexing through somebody's feet, and their feet or even their palms, or you might see across the forehead here, they start developing a light sweat, then that's this system saying, okay, I've had enough, I've started the detox program or the detoxing system, and I'm just gonna relax now, okay. So it can also come out in other ways, so other fluids, obviously peeing, okay, urination. A lot of people straight afterwards, even though they're incredibly thirsty and you do need to keep up your fluids afterwards, do have a very strong urge to urinate, okay, and that's all part of that detox system going through. It can also come out as gas, as flatulence, okay, you build up there in the GI system, and it's escaping out that way. And also it can make people really emotional, so sometimes it will come out as tears or even a runny nose. Basically, after the session that you've had with somebody, 24 to 72 hours afterwards, anything that's unusual within their system can be related to the detoxing that the reflexology has induced. Okay, so that's a couple of the benefits, the contraindications. By no means can you overstimulate an area. You just back off and do some light effleurage there. And I don't know that I actually introduced myself, which is a bit rude, so sorry about that, guys. So as I say, I'm Liz Van Beek, live in New Zealand, so it's nice and early here in the morning, and was working in the States for about 6 years, which yes, actually I did tell you that. Okay, so we're going to move on now, and we're going to go through the maps. And I've got a foot map to share with you, which got the reflexes just for anxiety. And I've also got a hand map that's got all of the reflex on it. And I'm just going to share with you the palmar surface. today, not to overload you with too much information. So if I share that foot map through with you now, you can have a quick relook at it, and we'll do some orientation. So that should be coming through to you now. Okay. So the foot map that you see there, and if you're looking for it, it's in the chat box. So pop down to the bottom there, just scroll on down to chat and click on that and it should open. So that area there, this will be the one that you're looking at. So looking at the feet, and I have got a foot here because it's a little bit difficult for me to get my feet up here and show you what's going on. So I'm going to show you through this one here. So basically, you've got the foot, and the entire map of the body is reflected on the foot, as well as the hands and the ears. And what we do is, if you imagine me shrunk down to the size of the foot, what you will see is that my head is depicted within my toes. Okay, so if you look at that map there, you can see that you've got the brain reflexes, which is the tips of the toes, and same with the tips of the fingers. As we travel down through the foot, we're traveling down through the body. So you'll see that the pituitary reflex is in the middle of the big toe. And the pituitary is an endocrine gland that is located right in the middle of our brain. So if we take a cross section from the tip of our ear and our third eye point, that's basically where the pituitary is found. Now we come on down to the ball of our foot, this area here, and the ball of our foot depicts our chest area or our thoracic area. So that's why you'll find within here the lung reflex. And we will work that one shortly. Next, we come on down to the whole inner arch area of the foot, and it's nice and soft in there. And that means coming down through the body, we're now into our abdominal cavity and all of the organs that sit really nicely in through there. So it's nice and soft on the front there, nice and soft and through the arch there. Okay. Then we come on down to the heel, and the heel is our whole pelvic girdle. And you will see on the picture that you've got a red line coming across the heel here. This is the sciatic nerve. So for anybody that suffers from sciatica, it's a really nice area to reflex, to massage. Now with our limbs, we have the medial aspect, we have the lateral aspect of our foot. And this is just like our arms are on the lateral side of our body. So we have the shoulder reflex underneath the pinky toe, and exactly the same on the hand. So it's underneath the pinky finger. And that whole knuckle area, you think of it as 3D. That whole entire knuckle area of the hand and the foot is our shoulder reflex. And if you come halfway down the foot, it's just the same as coming halfway down our body, and that's where we locate our hip reflex. So on our foot, you've got the metatarsal head. It's a little bone that quite often you can feel protruding if you massage around the side of your foot there. You can feel that massage in through there, and that is the hip reflex. And you come down from halfway all the way to the heel, and this is the rest of your leg. So up here is the arm, down here is the leg, just as it is on our anatomical body. Through the midline, or the medial aspect of the foot, so imagine I've got my other foot standing here. Actually, I'll do it with my hands. Through like this. So our thumbs, same as our big toes, they run down through the middle of our body. And that's where we find the spine reflex. And that runs straight down the middle of our body Therefore, it's down the midline of our feet. Neck reflex is under the big toe here, so just below the brain and through there, and then it continues all the way down through to the coccyx or the tailbone. Okay. So that's, in a nutshell, how the map looks on our body or on our foot. Same for the hands, and the ears is very different, so we won't go through the ears today because it's a little bit more involved. But if anybody's ever been to an acupuncturist, the same areas that we use for the needles there is the same that we use in the reflexology map. Okay, so we're going to go through and locate on our feet, well, fake feet here, areas for anxiety to work on. We've got the tips of the toes, okay? Tips of the toes all relate to our brain reflex, and therefore when we're reflexing them, we're stimulating our central nervous system. So it's stimulating that, and we're helping to bring down our anxiety, you know, bring down the influx of our central nervous system and our sympathetic and parasympathetic responses. And the great thing about doing any of the brain reflexes is that as you're stimulating the tips of the toes, we're using the tips of our fingers. So in effect, we're getting a double whammy of what's going on there. So what I want to do is support your foot, and if you've got your foot in your lap now, then you can take your shoes and socks off and you can do this one here. So protecting and cradling the toe itself, so it's not going to be wiggling around too much. And what we do is we roll our finger or a thumb over the top of that reflex on each and every digit. Okay. So rolling back and forwards, and I'm changing my fingers each time I do it because I'm wanting to reflex a different aspect of my brain as well. Come through, and we're doing all of them as we go. Now, as far as pressure is concerned, you can go very, very lightly, but it's not going to do a heck of a lot. If you think of skimming a rock over the top of water, it's just bouncing over the top, just skimming there, and it's barely touching the surface. Pretty cool if we can do that, we can skim the rocks. However, we want to actually plunge down into that pool and get some depth, and that's the same as what we want to do with reflexing. So I'll show you on a little ball here. We've got a ball, and I'll show you side on. So I've got no pressure at all on the ball here now. If I press in like this, you can see I'm creating quite a bit of pressure. Don't necessarily want to put in that much pressure because it can be painful, even if you're doing it to yourself. So just back off to not quite halfway, and you can see on the ball there just how much I'm giving. So that's none, that's excessive, and just back it off. Okay. The amount of pressure that you give over to yourself or somebody else does actually vary as well. So if we're going through an emotionally tough time, then you probably feel that you don't want to use as much pressure because you've already got your defenses up. You're already feeling that you want to be more nourished. Okay, so you use lighter pressure there. And likewise, if you've got an imbalance within the foot structure itself or the hand, then you won't want to be putting quite so much pressure in there. Any area that you're working on and it does feel quite niggly, as opposed to not getting any response at all, then it's an area that's telling you there's an imbalance in here, please work through it. It's very similar to finding, say, for example, a knot in your shoulder from the muscle. You want to work that and break up those little fibers and just release and create more space. It's pretty much what we're doing with reflexology as well. So we've worked the brain reflex there. Now we're going to come to our pituitary. And our pituitary, as I said before, is an endocrine gland in our brain, and it has a flow-on effect to other areas or other endocrine systems within the body. And you'll see on the map that the adrenals is there. That's an endocrine gland. So the pituitary has a flow-on effect with the hormones down to there as well. So I'm protecting and cradling that big toe area. And all I'm going to do, using my index finger or my thumb, if you're working on yourself, you'll find it easier with your thumb. And I'm going to depress into the very center of my big toe, hold for 3, and then release. I'm going to do that again, hold for 3, and release, and a 3rd time. Now, if you work with any kind of breath work, you can do this in conjunction with it. And the next point that we use, the solar plexus, which you'll see on your map, which sits between the thoracic area and the abdominal area. On our hands, it's really easy to find, and we'll go through that shortly. But we're basically pressing in. And if you take a line between your 2nd and 3rd toes, straight down to under the ball of the foot, that's where we find that solar plexus area. And you think of the solar plexus as basically your soul center. So physically, it doesn't exist, but emotionally, it is very, very prominent. And you can actually start out your session with this one here. It's really nice to depress a couple of times doing some breath work. And it helps to bring down that parasympathetic response. So again, we're pressing and holding for 3 and releasing and repeating. Really nice and calming, that one. Okay. So that's the solar plexus area. We're actually going to come back up now into this thoracic area, or the ball of the foot, and we're going to work what is known in this reflex area as the lung. Okay, and we're going to change techniques, and we're going to use one of the most common techniques that we use in reflexology, and it's called the caterpillar walk or the thumb walk. I had a student actually call it thumb twerking, which cracked us up. It's very appropriate. So basically what we're doing with this little action here, creating like a little caterpillar walk as we go down. So what we're doing, so depressing into the reflex, then we move our thumb slightly forward, so we're releasing the pressure off slightly forward and moving it along, then depressing in again, and repeating that as we go. So I'll show you on the foot here. So we're starting at the pinky side, pinky toe side, and we go across that reflex. All the way across to the ball of the big toe. And then we start again. So the lung reflex is quite big, and it takes up, if you measure on yourself, it'll be around about 2 fingers width. So the first time we go across with the caterpillar walk will be this top line, and then the second time will be the bottom line. And then we take that off, and then we start again. So you can go all the way across that lung reflex area 2 or 3 times. Now you may notice as you go through this area that it might feel very dense and hard, harder than you expect. And that's a depiction of an imbalance that's been there for quite a long time. Okay, perhaps if somebody is asthmatic, you might expect to find quite dense area in here. Alternatively, it could be really puffy. If, for example, someone has got a bout of bronchitis, which is depicted by the puffiness being an imbalance that's been there for a very short duration. And the third thing that you could find or feel feels like sand trapped underneath the skin. And that's an imbalance, very similar to what we were talking about before with the knot in the shoulder. It's your body's way of saying, here's where my imbalance is, please work it out. So we're reflexing along through there with that lung reflex. And the object of this, of working the lung reflex, is to open up all those capillaries, all those little bronchial nodes in there, get some more oxygen flowing, get the circulatory system flowing as well, getting more red blood cells, carrying that oxygen around the body, up to the brain, creating a bit more homeostasis in there. So that is the lung reflex. Let's give that a little bit of a rub out. And the next place we're going to come down to is the adrenal reflex. And as we talked before, the pituitary has a flow-on effect with the adrenals. The adrenals are a little bit of a tricky area to find to start with. So what I like to do is get my index finger and I put that on the knuckle of the big toe. So it's underneath the big toe at the base of the knuckle. Then I have my middle finger and my ring finger. And my ring finger comes down to underneath the ankle bone. And it's generally quite puffy area in there. And that is actually the bladder reflex. So if you press quite hard on that, you might need to excuse yourself. So don't press too hard. Then my middle finger sits naturally. Okay, so I'm not making it go down, I'm not making it go up. I'm just sitting it wherever's comfortable, and then I'm bringing that slightly underneath the foot. And I hope that's easy for you to see there. So now we've come around about a finger's width, around from the side of the foot, underneath the big toe, and you depress in there. You might want to just move around a little bit and see if you can feel. If you haven't been drinking enough water, okay, this could be really, really sensitive on you. Alternatively, you could find that nothing at all on your left foot, but then when you go and try and find it on your right foot, you could feel that there's quite a difference in there. Okay, so the adrenals, they are responsible for releasing adrenaline or noradrenaline for our fright and flight, for the responses there, either we stay still from shock or we run to the hills, okay? And the other thing that it releases is cortisol, and cortisol is our stress hormone. So we're working the adrenals there to balance out that adrenaline and those cortisol levels. And again, what we're doing, the same as when we utilized the pituitary, we're simply pressing in and holding for the count of 3, releasing again, pressing in for 3, release, and then repeat. Get a little bit of a glow out again. And then the last point that we've got on the feet that we're going to go through for anxiety is the spine reflex. And the spine reflex is a reflex that I'll use for absolutely every single session that I do, no matter what the pathology. And I start by basically rubbing up and down through the spine, just to warm up the tissue there. So rubbing up and down through there. The spine reflex goes from the neck reflex here, which is at the base of the big toe, all the way down to the base of the heel. Okay, so it's from the neck, and you're coming down through your thoracic area, down through the lumbar, all the way down to the bottom, which is your coccyx, or you might think of it as your tailbone. And what we do is we go into thumb walk all the way up that spine reflex. When I get to the top, it's not comfortable to come back down that way, so I'm actually going to change hands and come back down the other way. And you can see I'm moving my hand as I go down with that as well. Here we go. Okay. And we're going to repeat that back up again. You do it 4, 5, 6 times in both directions. And the spine reflex, when we're working that, not only are we working the bones, but we are also working all the muscles attached to it, the central nervous system. So it's basically getting our synapses within our brain firing, sending the messages to the reflex, away from the reflex, out to that corresponding area. And then we can give that a rub out again to finish. So with reflexology, when we're working the map of the feet or the hands or the ears, and we're depressing into a specific area, so for example, we're going into the coccyx area here, we're depressing into there, and the thought is that we are mostly using the nervous system when we're doing any kind of reflexology. Okay, so we're depressing into the reflex. The message is carried up to the brain, and then the brain sends that down to the corresponding area. So in this respect, it's going to be down to the coccyx, so our physical coccyx or tailbone. How our body knows to do this is beyond me, and I don't think I will ever completely understand it, but it is amazing. Sometimes you can actually feel it in that physical area or another area, that is where it's going through to. And I believe also that when we're reflexing, we are bringing in the cardiac system as well, the circulatory system. And as well as the brain telling the reflex area and the physical reflex area that it wants more stimulation via the nervous system, also it's bringing in that all those red blood cells or the white blood cells or the plasma into that area to help with the immunity, help with the with creating a harmonious environment within that to create a rebalance. So creating homeostasis within the body. So that's the foot reflexes there for anxiety. We have the brain, which is in the tips of the toes. We have the pituitary, which is in the very center of the big toe. We have the solar plexus. We have the lung reflex. We have the adrenal reflex. And then we have the spine. So if you're working with any kind of pathology, you think which systems are at play within that pathology, and that's the areas that you will work on. So they're the main ones for anxiety that we work. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a map of the hands, and we're going to do the same thing again using your hands. So we're going to take a little bit more time to go through this one because our hands are a lot more easy to utilize ourselves. And I keep doing this because this is stimulating my brain reflex here. So we probably notice when people are thinking, they'll strum their fingers together or across the top of a desk. You're actually stimulating the brain reflex. Okay. So I'm going to share with you now the hand map. And as I say, it has got all of the reflexes for the palmar surface on it. So you'll look at it and go, oh, that's a lot of information. You can, if you like, put that aside and look at it later on, or you can look at it and you can go through it with me now. Now, I did just realize before I put this up that I haven't actually put the solar plexus onto those maps. And where you're going to find the solar plexus is at the base of the knuckles. So if you see when I bend my hand, you can see the crease in through here. And I'm sorry, I'm not a palm reader, so I can't tell you all the names of the lines. But basically, take a line straight from your middle finger down to that crease, and that is where we're going to find that solar plexus or the soul center. And this area here, if you cannot remember every other area to utilize, this one here is the one to use for anxiety or anything emotionally charged. Okay. So you can depress into that. You can cup your hand really nicely, have it laying into your lap. It's really discreet. You can be sitting in a meeting and depressing in this area. You can be waiting in line at the supermarket, depressing this area. And of course, everything is bilateral. So you're working both sides as well. So we're going to start our hand reflexology for anxiety with the solar plexus. So I'm actually supporting my wrist as well as I'm doing this. And I deep press in, take a nice breath, count to 3, and then slowly let it out. And again, nice and deep breath, let it out. And as I'm releasing my breath, I'm releasing the pressure on that reflex area as well. And again, in and release. So if you're doing this flow on yourself, you can either choose to mirror each reflex point as you go through both hands, or you can do one complete hand and then the other complete hand. And you might change it up. One time you might do complete hand and then the next time you do it, you might choose to do them at the same time. So we started with the solar plexus here to help to bring down into a more comfortable level of anxiety. And then we're going to go through the tips of our fingers. So just like we did with the tips of our toes, we're going to roll our fingers over the tips in order to stimulate those brain reflexes. Now, I really like this one because I think of it a little bit as cheating because you're going to do double whammy at one time. So I start with my thumbs, have them together, and then what I'm doing is rolling. So I'm moving my wrists and I'm rolling with a little bit of pressure. If you've got long fingernails, you might find this a little bit tricky. So you might have to go and do it this way. If you've got short nails, you'll be able to roll across the top like this. And I'm going to repeat that with every single digit. And back and forth 4, 5, 6 times, whatever feels comfortable to you. You might feel a little bit of that sand or grittiness in some of the reflexes. Just work it a little bit longer. Not necessarily more pressure, but just work it out a few more times. You might work it out 10, 20 times. I feel just around the very end of that one, there's a little bit of grit in there. And for the little fingers as well, the pinky fingers. Nice. Okay, give those a little bit of a shake out. So that's our brain reflex done there. Next, we're going to come down to our pituitary reflex. And as we know, pituitary was located in the very center of our toe, center of our head. So therefore, center of our big toe, big thumb, a thumb. It's no bigger than the other one. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm actually wrapping my index finger around my opposite thumb just to protect it from getting moved around too much. So I'm doing that, and then I'm depressing my thumb into the center. And if I use the side of my thumb, okay, as opposed to straight on, it's getting a little bit more direct pressure into there. Hold for 3 and relax it out. Repeat that again. And if you've got a mantra that you like to say, it's a really nice time to do that. Or you can continue with your breathing, or set an intention for what you want to become with your day. And again, we do that bilaterally. And release. Release. And a third time. You don't have to do it 3 times. You might have favorite number being 7. You might do everything 7 times. I choose 3. It's nice and easy for me. Okay. Next one we come down to is a lung reflex. So we remember from our feet, our lung reflex was in the ball of the foot. So over the knuckle area. And again, we're going to use the knuckle area of our hand, okay? Basically, we're going to use from our index finger, middle finger, and our ring finger. The shoulder reflex is located under the pinky finger, so we won't go too much over there. So if you're thinking your lungs go across and then you hit your shoulder. And what we do, a little bit tricky for me to show you this way around, but I'm going to utilize my thumb, protecting my hand, and I'm going to thumb walk. So we're using this caterpillar motion again. Thumb walk across that reflex area of the lungs. Now on yourself, easiest way to do this is to have one hand resting in the other in your lap, and you are going from your ring finger across to your index finger. Going across like that. Or you might find it easier to go ring finger through to your, index finger through to your ring finger. The biggest thing that you want to work on when you're working with yourself is to keep your shoulders nice and relaxed, okay? Because if you go anxiety or you're just tensed up anyways, perhaps another kind of stress, if you're working the things up here and you're bringing it up, you're not allowing that beautiful lung reflex to completely relax. So you want to keep your shoulders down, keep your elbows down, and your wrists relaxed as you're working as well. So even though I'm showing you up through here, I'm trying to keep my shoulders down. You probably noticed it's not always worked very easily. So that's the lung reflex in there. Next, we're going to come down and we're going to work the adrenal reflex. And you'll see that as a little P on the map. And it's located next to the thumb. So just like in our foot, we came down from the big toe underneath the ball of the foot into there. If you can see, when I bend my hand, I bring my thumb across, we've got a line in through here. If I draw a line from my index finger down to that crease, that is about where you're going to find the adrenal reflex. So again, rest it in your hand and depress into there. And again, if you haven't been drinking enough water, then this could be quite an alarming point for you. Also, if you're holding along to a lot of stress, that can be quite an alarming point as well. Again, we do it bilaterally, and we're simply depressing in, counting to 3 and relaxing. Depressing in and relaxing. And a third time. And breathe it out. Nice. Okay, so we've got all of those areas there. Last area is the spine reflex. Okay, so it's all the way along our thumb to the base of the middle of our hand. And what we do, wrap my hand around here, come all the way up using that thumb twerking. When I get up to my thumb, I actually move my hand to protect the thumb. And I'm working up as well as coming back down again. So that is the entire spine. And you might find within there that there is 1 or 2 spots along your spine that are a little bit more niggly than the other one. Just work that a little bit more. Get rid of that imbalance. Have your synapses firing, sending the messages around your body, sending some more circulation into that area. Nice. So rub those out. Give a little bit of massage. And a really nice way to finish off a self-reflexology session, especially if it's anxiety or stress related, is if you've got a favorite essential oil. Okay, and they come in all sorts of different ones. I really enjoy peppermint because not only do I find it enlivening, but also as a carminative. So put a couple of drops on my hand here, rub my hands together. Nice deep breath in and then relax that out. And again, I do that 3 times. 3's not even my favorite number, so I'm not sure why, but that's what I like to do. So again, the reflexes are for our hand. We've done our solar plexus in the center there. The brain reflexes on the tips of our fingers. We've done our lungs area here. Our adrenals. And then our spine reflex. So 6 nice simple areas. 6 can be a lot when you're in the throes of anxiety. So if in doubt, just utilize that solar plexus area. And there we go. So that's an introductory to reflexology, as well as working some reflexes for anxiety. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to write them in the question and answer area down the bottom, or even in the chat box, and we can get those answered for you. If you don't have any questions at the moment, but you think of them later on, feel free to fire them through to the Fire Centre or through to myself, and there's a link to my email as well. It's basically info, I'll write it in for you actually, info@naturesoffusion.com. Go. So that's the address there, and I do believe that Kayla's sent a link as well. So any questions, please feel free to shoot those through. We do have a question here from Caroline. if you do feel some pain, should you move onto it or back off? I may have missed that. So Carolyn, if you feel some pain or imbalance, say we're going through the spine reflex there, you want to keep going to stimulate a response within that area. You can back off the amount of pressure that you're using, because if it's already painful, you don't want to go and add more pain into there, because if your shoulders will come up even more. But do keep going. And even if you just do it 2 or 3 times, and then you can back off, come back to it half an hour later, and then redo it again. Just keep doing it. Okay, create a habit of doing it as well. I'll very often, if I'm talking to somebody, I'll be reflexing something in my hand and I won't even know that I'm doing it. And they'll be like, oh, you're nervous. It's like, oh no, sorry, I'm just reflexing it. I've been doing it for 10+ years. So it's just part of my psyche, who I am now. Cool. All right, let's see if we've got some other questions here. Yes, there will be a replay link. Jennifer, Kayla will put that through. She'll do some editing to it and then put that through, I believe, this evening sometime. Oh, thank you, Cricket. Thank you very much. I'm glad that you were able to come and join us. Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on board with us today. I do believe that, unfortunately, our time is up. Keep supporting the Fine Centre. It's an amazing place for all sorts of resources to do with just relaxing ourselves and being in the present. So thank you very much again. Oh, Caroline, one more question. Are these points at all similar to acupressure points? So when we're using acupressure in our ears, the maps are the same. The acupressure points run through our meridian lines. So the meridian lines aren't necessarily straight, they run all wiggly around our body. So the map of acupressure is actually very different from a reflexology map. Although, for instance, Solar Plexus that we use here is in a very close proximity to pericardium 4, which does do the same thing. It relaxes our nervous system. All right, everybody, I think that is everything answered there. I do apologize if I've missed your question there. Thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again in the future. Happy reflexing. Thanks, everybody.